Well, good morning, everyone. I am Colleen Wedgemont. I am also from Southeastern Pennsylvania, and it's my pleasure to reintroduce our next presenter, Mike Kuczala. Mike, I want to thank you for the amazing keynote last night. It was definitely had the wow factor, and this morning's session was so helpful, relaxing, and like an aha moment for all of us. So I'm not going to repeat what's already done, but I am going to give you a few more facts about that you may not have heard. They're interesting. And he's delivered keynotes, given presentations, facilitated professional development, and taught graduate courses on 4 continents. His presentations, courses, books, videos have reached more than 100,000 teachers, trainers, parents, and corporate executives. As Ellen mentioned, Mike has authored or co-authored 4 books: The Kinesthetic Classroom, Teaching and Learning Through Movement, have that one. Training in Motion, How to Use Movement to Create an Engaging and Effective Learning Environment. Ready, Set, Go, The Kinesthetic Classroom 2.0. And his latest, The Peak Performing Teacher, 5 Habits for Success. That's my next book to pick up, Mike. Mike is a former certified nutrition and wellness consultant, a former competitive bodybuilder, and trained in the art of effortless meditation, which he showed us this morning. As he mentioned, he proudly and humbly comes from a family of educators, including his wife, sister, both parents, and 3 grandparents. He earned his Bachelor of Arts in Music at Kuczala University and a Master of Music Education from the University of Northern California. Now we look forward to Mike's presentation now on why classroom-based physical activity is critical in the post-pandemic era. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's funny when I hear that bodybuilding comment. Yeah, it's from another lifetime ago, right? I mean, long decades and decades. And I am in southeastern Pennsylvania, just outside of Reading. If anyone knows where that is, it's about an hour northwest of Philadelphia. Good. And happy to be back with you today. It's been really fun, this conference, even though it's been virtual. It's been really pleasing for me to be part of. And so today, and I would ask your patience with me technically, I'm not the most technical savvy. We all had to become more than we were during the pandemic, but I'm going to go back and forth between this and sharing my screen and sharing some videos, actually. And the part about why physical activity is so critical in the post-pandemic era is going to happen pretty quickly, because I just have it boiled down to a few slides. It's what researchers have found over the pandemic. And then we'll get into the really the biggest reasons, in my estimation, why, and I deal mostly in classroom-based physical activity. Hopefully it'll apply to the physical educators that are here today. There will be some activities that will be usable in that circumstance, and there will be some ideas talked about with fitness, etc. But why it still remains so important. So we'll discuss those 2. There's so many reasons, a whole lot more than I'm going to have time to list today. But from my estimation, we'll talk about the 2 most important reasons. Then we'll move on to a framework that my co-author and very good friend, Tracy Langle, who's a dynamite health and physical educator in Northern Pennsylvania, designed probably back in about 2007, how to use classroom-based physical activity, thoughtfully and purposefully. And I'll show you some activities. I have lots of video to share with you today, and hopefully I'll even get you up 1 or 2 times to try a few things out. So let's get back to the title of the session. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint. Let's see how this goes today. Last night I couldn't get it to work quite right, but we'll give it a shot. So I want to share. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. It worked today. Fantastic. So here's what some of the researchers have said about classroom-based physical activity in general, and what's happened in the pandemic with COVID-19. 3 points of research, and I think we all know this already, but this is the research to support it. The COVID-19 pandemic has a negative impact on physical activity. And it just has put downward pressure on physical activity, which leads us into the second point. Those who reduced their level of physical activity had the highest level of mood disorders. So, the physical activity drops and you're not sleeping as well. Your mental health isn't as taken care of, etc. So it's just kind of a downward spiral when we're not recognizing the brain-body connection and doing something about that all the time. And finally, the pandemic period is characterized by reduced or lack of movement. So these are just 3 research points that I wanted to share with you today, just to highlight the fact that over the past 2 years, physical activity has been reduced. And especially when kids were virtual, it's more difficult than when we're in a classroom with them or in a gymnasium with them. So it's important to recognize this. It's important to recognize the mental health challenges that go along with this. And, what do we do about it? The second point is this. Recent research has found a significant rise in obesity rates among children and teens over the course of the pandemic. It was already bad, accelerating an already troubling upward trend. So it's all the stuff we know, we would have guessed, the research supports it. So, what do we do about it? And this is just, hang on one second. I'm sorry. Let me get rid of this. Okay. What I want to share with you today, aside from the fact of just movement and physical activity and all the benefits that brings with it, is why it continues to be so critical that children move in the teaching and learning process. And I'm just going to glance at the brain-body connection because I went full into it last night in the keynote. And I just want you to understand and just highlight once again how critical that is, to understand that it's always in play, that the longer your students sit, the more they jeopardize the learning process. That, the classroom needs to be more lifelike and 3-dimensional, and kids need to move. It doesn't always have to be a grand brain break or a great activity. It could just be get together with your 2 o'clock partner and discuss the last 3 questions that we talked about in class, and just getting up, getting around the room, getting some blood flow and oxygen around the brain and body is critical for the teaching and learning process. So the brain-body connection is always in play. We need to recognize it. We need to know that it's a factor. And the more you know about it, the more you can take advantage of it instead of it taking advantage of your teaching and learning process. So the longer your kids sit, the less likely they're going to be efficient and effective learners. So what are those 2 reasons? There's a little bit of discussion I'm going to have now. We'll get to some video in a few minutes. But for me, even if we look at things like attention, retention, motivation, sensory input, there's so many different reasons why physical activity is so critical. But these are the 2 that I want to highlight. And they really revolve around long-term memory. As teachers, our jobs are long-term memory. That's it. End of story. Whether it's content related, whether it's social emotionally related, whether it's physically related in a gymnasium, we want students to be able to use content again. That's the point of us having a teaching job, right? But my fear is that, teachers figure it out, how kids remember information, but we don't have a great grasp on the different types of memory systems and how physical activity plays a role in this. And so let me just do this discussion with you. First of all, I'm just going to go briefly into what happens when memories form, and take a look at an information processing model that hopefully will make sense to you. So it used to be thought that we had short-term and long-term memory. We now know that short-term memory is divided into 2 areas. Immediate memory, which has lasts about 45 to 60 seconds, and working memory, where most school information, that's where it really gets processed. Real quick example of what I'm talking about with immediate memory. For those of you who are old enough to remember having to look up a phone number to have a pizza delivered, and you would go into your phone book, get to the right page, look it up, get it here, walk to the wall to pick up the phone off of the wall, dial the number. Like if no one talked to you on the way, you were good. But if someone said, hey, what are you doing? And it's done, right? It's gone. You have to go back to the phone book or you have to write it down. That's immediate memory at work, right? And so that happens all the time. We're being bombarded by tens of thousands of bits of unrelated or just cognitive information all the time. And our brain has filters so we don't get overwhelmed. And immediate memory is one of those stops. We're in lots of information when we're driving to work. We see thousands of cars on the way. That information is not important to our survival. It gets shoved out. What we want for school information to do is to get through immediate memory. And some kids may not let it through. If they have a bad history with your subject, guess what? It might not even make it to immediate memory. That's another emotional part of all this. But we want it to get to working memory. Right? But there are some severe working memory capacity limits. So if you're dealing with kids who are ages 5 years and under, they have about a working memory capacity of about 1 to 3 items of unrelated bits of information at one time. If you're dealing with kids who are ages 5 to 14, it's 3 to 7. And if you're dealing with kids and adults ages 14 and up, it's 5 to 9. It's not very much. What does that mean? If I put a PowerPoint up with 14 numbers on it, gave you 60 seconds to memorize it, you couldn't do it. Eventually you could by chunking and meaning and use, but you couldn't do it in that very moment because it exceeds your working memory capacity. Think about how often we exceed working memory capacity in a school day. Kids need to learn in short bursts, then they need to process the information. We do a little bit of review and then we go back to the short bursts. So where do we want this information to end up is in long-term memory storage. And that's a trick because our brain is like, it wasn't designed to remember all this information. Now, if something has really a huge emotional impact or emotional content, that's the hot stove. You put your hand on the hot stove, you'll never do it again because your brain instantly takes that as a survival mechanism and you have it forever. But is school content that way? Our kids on the edge of their seats going, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next thing you have to say, lay it on me, right? Most school content is not that way. But all learning is emotional. I'll come back to that statement in a little bit. So here's the first part of this with physical activity. For information to get from working memory to long-term memory, something has to happen to it, right? You just can't get it to working memory and hope for the best. It has to be processed. You have to find an emotion around it. You have to repeat it 1,000 times. You have to do research on it. You have to study it. You have to learn by moving. And this is where physical activity can come into powerful play. The brain prefers to do things through implicit channels, through things like movement and things like emotion, right? Most school learning happens explicitly with discussion, listening, note-taking, reading. I'm not saying any of those things are bad. They're important to school learning, but the brain is more comfortable in implicit channels. So what am I talking about? I'm in the room with people. I'll often say, who in here can tell me the first 10 presidents of the United States? And almost no one raises their hand, even in a big crowd, maybe 1 or 2. I say, okay. How many people in here can change a light bulb? Everybody raises their hand. I would say that, learning 10 names is not that much more difficult than changing a light bulb. We just take the light bulb thing for granted because it's how the brain prefers to do things. You saw someone change it once, you tried it yourself once or twice, you had it for life. That's power, that information. Didn't happen that way with the 10 names. 10 names are easy, but it didn't stick. It's not meaningful. It was learned through explicit channels, and so it doesn't stick. So we can use our bodies to learn. It is one of the most effective and efficient ways to retain information. And so we want to use that to our advantage when thinking about how we get this information to working memory, to long-term memory, to use our bodies when possible. I'm not saying that learning this way is effective all the time, but when you can use it, please know its power and understand how wonderful that can be. So part 2 of this, and I think is even the more critical reason for physical activity in a classroom, is we have two criteria, non-emotional criteria, and it's tough to say that anything is non-emotional, but it's the difference between a powerful emotional experience and dry content. And they are, does it make sense? And does it have meaning? Right? Sense and or meaning. And the more powerful one is meaning, because meaning does have an emotion wrapped around it. Okay, so we need to pay attention to those two criteria, right? So here is the sentence, I think, of the day. Meaning making is state dependent. Meaning making, the number one criteria for storing things in the long term, the focus of who we are as teachers, is state dependent, meaning how I feel during content acquisition matters. So I'm asking you to be good state managers with your students, the managers of their brain, body, emotional states, because how they feel during content acquisition matters. If you see kids sitting and they're just like, oh, they're not a problem, no one's talking, but you see the body language, they're looking out the window, they're yawning. Whatever you're doing, stop. Get them up, because your number one available manager of state is physical activity in the classroom. There's lots of ways to manage state. We can do it through music. We can do it through, different ways to seat kids. I can yell like that quickly and I can change someone's state. But physical activity is your number one available manager of state in the classroom, and that is critical to the long-term memory process, which is what we're after as teachers. So how can we achieve this? And this is where I was referring to the framework that we created. Tracy and I did probably back in about 2007. And I would like to share that with you today. And this is where I'll start to share some activities and share some video. Tracy and I created this framework for teachers to use, so they use movement thoughtfully and purposefully, and it contains this. We can prepare the brain to learn. There are specific activities in different settings and formats that we can use to help the brain be more ready to learn. We can provide brain breaks. I know you've already had a session on that today. I'll talk about a few benefits and I'll show you a few more activities. We can support exercise. Tracy and I had a big debate about whether or not we wanted to put this in the framework, because how much influence does a classroom teacher have over the fitness lives of their students? But it turns out that's a pretty important relationship, so we included it. Step 4 in the framework is creating class cohesion, creating an emotional environment that stimulates intellectual achievement. And then step 5 is reviewing content. Step 6 is teaching content, what I was just talking about with getting information from working memory to long-term memory. So what does this look like? Let me introduce a little bit of preparing the brain. When I'm going to share this video with you today, you are going to see Tracy do a few cross the midline activities. And that's fine. And what I want to say to you is that I'm excited because you're going to get to see Tracy work. She's a dynamite teacher, dynamite graduate instructor. I just want you to know that there has not been a ton of research done here. They can't hurt. They're great brain breaks, and they may help. They may help the hemispheres to coordinate more effectively, but it just hasn't been researched that much. So just take it for what it is, use them as brain breaks, and it may help. Then I'm going to share some videos with you about kids coming to school in a fashion where they're not quite as ready to learn from a physical perspective. Their vestibular development is lacking, more so than it was a generation ago. Would you agree? They're coming to school and they haven't had the same experience. I'm not an old guy who says kids don't play outside anymore. Of course they do, but not as much. They don't roll, spin, hop, jump, fall down and get themselves back up as they did a generation ago. Right? We know that their cores are not as strong as they were a generation ago. And so there are some specific activities that we can use to help vestibular system develop. It's one of the earliest brain systems develop. It lets us know where we are in space. It lets us know I'm at point A and how to get to point B. It helps support visual muscles for tracking across a page. So it's critical that kids develop this. And I want to show you some of those as well. Finally, underneath the umbrella of preparing the brain to learn, I'm going to show you some videos of something that Dr. Lynn Kenny and I call brain primers. There's some really exciting new research about how rhythmic, coordinative, beat-based physical activity can support executive function. Things like cognitive flexibility, working memory, planning, response inhibition, critical to school success, more important to academic achievement than IQ. And we can do that physically. It's really exciting. We're just starting to scratch the surface of this relationship. And the more people understand the research and the more they feel it, the more that they'll use it in the classroom and the more administrators will buy in. So let's take a look at a few of these videos of these 3 different areas. And then when we're done, it'll certainly be time. It's already 11:20. We're going to stand up and do one of these activities. So let me see, share this screen. Here we go.
The first group would be 60 and 60. So your student's goal is to do 60 of them in 60 seconds, and they can modify as needed. The first one, hand clapping, toe tapping. Let's see those just for a couple seconds to demonstrate. Go ahead.
And these are, of course, we're starting out.
Okay, we're crossing the midline in this, which is ideal for stimulating both sides of the brain. Crisscrosses. Very good. You don't need to jump. You can modify if need be. The third one, let's try elbow to knee touches. Make sure we're crossing the midline. A lot of your students will stay on the same side. They'll do right elbow to right knee, and that's a concern. Our next section is going to be spin 30.
So this is getting into vestibular
as many times as you can in 30 seconds. But if you feel dizzy or like you're losing balance, you need to stop. All right, so the first one is jumping jack spins. Go ahead and try a few of those. And you don't need to spin quickly. You can modify. You can go at your own pace and speed. You can do a few and then change directions. Okay, time. The next one, which is a lot of students' favorite, is the 360 spin. Modification would be a 180 and then a 180. And if you want to try a full 360, go ahead. But if you do, go one direction and then the next time the opposite direction. Try the 360 or 180. Okay, I see some of you doing the 180. That's perfect. Some of you are going for the 360. That's perfect as well. This is called the 30-60 hold. This would mean that your students would get in the position and try and hold it and maintain their balance for either 30 seconds or 60 based on what your goal is that day. The first one we're going to demonstrate is the arabesque. Let's see the arabesque. Perfect. It's easy for a few seconds, but 30 seconds or 60 gets difficult. Time. Let's move to the tree. This is a very common, popular yoga pose.
Okay, you're getting the idea. And I'm going to move on at this point. So those are vestibular system development activities. When I'm done with this next couple of videos, we'll do one together, but it's about spinning, hopping, balancing, jumping, etc., to help develop vestibular system. So what I'm going to show you next is something that I was on Twitter in 2020. We have something called brain primers, and I'm not at all, I don't want you to buy anything. That's not why I'm here. I'm not trying to sell you anything, because I'm comfortable telling you about it because I can show you where you can get some free brain primers, which will last you a long time. So let me show you the video first, then I'll show you where you can get the brain primers. And this is me, 2 different videos doing these rhythmic, coordinative, beat-based physical activities that support executive function in the classroom. So here we go.
I'm Kuczala, author of the Kinesthetic Classroom, Teaching and Learning Through Movement series of books.
Sounds not great, sorry.
I'm here today with your Active Home Challenge. Dr. Lynn Kenny and I call these activities brain primers because recent research shows that these rhythmic, coordinative, beat-based movements actually support executive function, which is more important to academic achievement than IQ. So not only will you be physically active, you're also going to be supporting cognitive function. I'm going to start these activities with a rhythmic cadence to let my brain know that I should stay in that cadence during each sequence. I'm going to do it 3 times, one at a slow pace, one at a medium pace, one at a fast pace. Your challenge is to do it at all 3 speeds. Stay tuned for a later episode where you can merge both activities together. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. One, two, ready, go. One, two, ready, go. Have fun.
All right, let's go to I was just grabbing something I want to share with you. Let's go to the next video. It's just right down here. Or no, it's back up this way. Sorry. Here we go.
I'm Mike Kuczala, author of the Kinesthetic Classroom Teaching and Learning Through Movement series of books. And I'm here for a second active home challenge that follows up my first one with what Dr. Lynn Kenny and I call brain primers. These rhythmic, coordinative, beat-based physical activities, recent research shows that these actually support executive function, which is more important to academic achievement than IQ. So not only will you be physically active, you're also going to be supporting cognitive function. I'm going to do one activity 3 times at 3 different speeds. Your challenge will be to do them at these different speeds. I'm also going to give a cadence at the beginning of each one that helps my brain to know to stay in that cadence during the entire activity. Also, be sure, now that you've gone through a second active home challenge of brain primers, merge them together if you want with the previous brain primer activity. 1, 2, ready, go. One, two, ready, go. One, two, ready, go. Good luck.
Okay. So there you have an idea about brain primers, what they are. You can see how complicated and complex they could get. We have like 18 different movements. You can do them at different rhythms and tempos, and you're really helping to support cognitive function and executive function. So ultimately, this is what they look like. They're cards that we have had student models do this, and it takes you right through the activities, 1 per card. There's 4 decks. There's about 45 cards per deck. You can get free ones that you'll have to print, but they'll last you a long time. So if you search Moving Minds, because the Moving Minds is the classroom division of Gopher Sport, and they publish these. If you search Moving Minds Brain Primers, it'll take you to the link. You'll just have to enter your email address, and they will send you a downloadable PDF for 8 of these cards. So have fun with those with your students. So that is preparing the brain. Again, we're just scratching the surface, understanding how movement works in the teaching and learning process, especially with younger students. And I hope you take a peek at that. So I want to now get into providing brain breaks, the second part of the framework. And essentially, some people don't like the word break. We're kind of stuck with it because we used it in all of our books. Some people like blast, boost, energizer. That's fine because your brain's on fire. And you know what? There is some really new research. Let me just say this first. When you're seated for too long, right, blood pools in your butt and legs. And we need to stand up, and we get about 10% more blood flow around the brain and body and oxygen flow. That's what we're after. The other thing that happens when you sit for too long is your brain says, hey, you've been sitting for a while. You must be sleepy. And it makes you sleepier. Have you felt that? Have you experienced that? You've been in a meeting, you've been in a presentation, and you've been sitting for too long, and I didn't get you up, but I will. So, and the other thing is, I know in your classrooms, in your health classrooms, your students all sit like this with their hands folded, posture great, and they can't wait for the next thing that you're going to discuss, right? And it's more like, oh, she is talking again, and they cramp their breathing system. So there's lots of reasons to get up out of a chair. In fact, researchers say, hey, culturally, we look at sitting as the norm. When we want to take a break, we stand up for a few minutes. And what they're suggesting is that we look at standing as the norm. And when we want to take a break, we sit down for a few minutes. It's a shift. It's a slow shift, but it's happening slowly but surely. So let me share my screen. And after we get done with brain breaks, I promise we'll stand up and take a break ourselves. So I'm going to share. Let me get out of the last thing here. Come on.
Hi, I'm Mike
No,
Kuczala,
get me out of here. There we go.
Teaching and learning through movement.
Okay, this is Tracy again with some graduate students doing brain breaks. The first one is show your size.
So we are going to do a brain break that it's very easy, very basic. You don't need a lot of space. And basically your students will just move around the room. And you can give them different things to be, different objects, different people. Really, you can use your imagination with this and let them do basically what's comfortable to them. So let's everyone just stand up and mill and be yourself. Be yourself first. Just walk around the classroom being you. Now let's be the tallest version of ourselves. As tall as we can be, as high as we can be. If you can get on your toes, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. Let me see the tiniest version of yourself. Some of you are tinier than others, and that's okay. How about a mouse? Since you're so tiny right now, what would a mouse look like? What about a big giant dinosaur? What would that look like? How about a cute little bunny? Okay, and let me see you be yourself again. Just walk proudly and be who you are. Awesome. Let's fist bump a friend and head back to our seat. We're going to do a brain break with tennis balls. And tennis balls are wonderful at the high school level, not as great at the elementary because they end up chasing the tennis ball a little bit too much, so beanbags would probably be a better option. All right, so the first one, just take your tennis ball for a walk around the room. Practice control. Use your right hand to catch it a few times. Try your left hand a few times. Just to build comfort, confidence, and control. That's our goal here. Okay, let's stop. Let's take our tennis ball around our head. Now you could even, with students, just have them do something silly like this for 30 seconds and see how many times, other direction, they could get the ball around their head, like a little speed race. Let's go around our waist, and let's try and pick up our speed if we can. Go at a speed that works for you. Go.
All right, so I have an idea of a few more brain breaks. I want to show you one more, and I'm going to set it up for you before I show you. It's sitting on my desktop. I'll pull it up. I'm assuming some of you were not in the keynote last night. So this is called the mean face, funny face jump. And I just want to show it to you. You set it up by having students stand, get in pairs. They face each other. They each show their partner their really happy, smiley face. Then they show their partner their really mean, nasty face. And then you have them go back to back. When I say ready, jump, they jump in the air and turn and face each other with the idea that they choose if they want to show their happy face or their mean face, and the idea is to match. And this is a quick video. It'll just take about 20 seconds of doing this actual brain break with some teachers in New York City a few years back. Let me get rid of this for a moment. So it's going to come up pretty quickly. So here we go. This is the end result.
Ready, jump.
I just love that video and love the joy of physical activity in learning. So those are a few examples of brain breaks. Critical. Kids of all ages, all of us adults need to be moving every 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Now let's stand up ourselves. I'm not gonna tell you to do something and then not do it. So I wanna show you a vestibular system development exercise. It does involve some spinning and hopping. So if you want to take part, that's great. And if not, that's okay too. I'm going to stand up and do the best I can to show you. So this is called the one-legged hop and spin. So I'm going to take my right hand and I'm going to grab my left foot at the ankle behind my right leg. Okay, I know you can't see me, but I have my right foot with my, or left foot with my right hand behind, and I'm going to spin 3 times this way and 3 times that way. So at your leisure, go ahead and do it. Back the other way. Now you're going to take your left hand, grab your right foot behind your left leg, and same thing. Spin 2 or 3 times one way and 2 or 3 times the other. Go. And then when you're all done, the one-legged hop and spin, you can have a seat. That was a little more difficult for me today because in all honesty, I don't have any shoes on, just socks. So that was kind of rough, but fun. So moving on to the next step in the framework. So Tracy and I had this discussion, supporting exercise and fitness. Do we include it? 2 things changed our minds. And the first one is that we know, and again, I think I'm preaching to the choir, we know that physically fit kids do better academically. The research has been going on forever. Back in the early 2000s in California with 1 million kids, 2006, I believe, with 2.5 million kids in Texas. They compared the state achievement tests with the state fitness grams, and what they found were the kids who were more fit were doing better academically. So at some point in around 2006, 7 or 8, Dr. Charles Hillman, great researcher, now he's at Northeastern, he was at the University of Illinois, he replicated that, okay? Same thing, he replicated it, but he wanted to see what was going on inside the brain, and what he found was a more efficient brain, right? But what he also found was that even the kids who were not physically fit, when they were exposed to acute bouts of aerobic activity, their brains were on fire for about the next 45 minutes to an hour. And this is where the program at Naperville was birthed. So with Learning Readiness PE, and the data is fantastic. So I'm not going to go down that road today, but we know that physically fit kids do better academically. We know that kids who are maybe not physical fit still get a cognitive benefit from it because they're actually working harder than the kid who is physically fit. So and we have developed exercises and activities for teachers to use in the classroom because it's important for them to be role models, to let students know that their physical life, their fitness life is critical to their academic life, that their fitness life is critical to their emotional life, critical to their social life, as I talked about last night, critical to a successful life. And it can start with the classroom teacher. So we were excited to put that together. And the other thing is, the other thing that changed our mind before I show you a few activities is that there is a research point that came out from the CDC in the year 2000. 1 in 3 kids born in the year 2000 will be a type 2 diabetic. That's insane. The number rises to 1 in 2 if they're African-American or Hispanic. So Tracy and I just felt a responsibility to include this in the framework. And I want to show you a few activities right now. This is Tracy once again. A few ideas of how to use exercise in a classroom setting.
We're going to be doing some examples of some exercises that I think are very appropriate for the classroom. Most of them.
I'm not seeing it, Mike.
Oh, you're not? Okay, hang on. Sorry. You know what? It's this tech thing. I didn't share the screen. Oh yeah, I did share the screen. Hang on. No, I didn't. Didn't click the share button. Sorry. Now you can see my kids. They're a lot older than that now. Here we go.
For example, the first one is called Max 60 Muscular Challenges. So that means there's a muscular goal. The first one is a wall seat. And the intention here is to hold the wall seat to strengthen your quad muscles for 60 seconds without standing up. And we would hold this, you would have your students do this for 60 seconds. So what's the goal here right now? The goal is to think about something other than math and science and social studies and language arts. The goal is to think about the burning in your legs. That's what we're doing. It's a brain break, and it is supporting exercise and fitness at the same time. A second example is called partner back-to-back passing. So you would have your students match up with a partner, grab a ball or a beanbag or a stuffed animal, really any object that is safe, and for 60 seconds, they will pass the ball around to each other. We're now going to move to something called Max 60 cardiorespiratory challenges. All right, so our first one is going to be jump twists. So the goal here is to do 60 jump twists in 60 seconds. So go ahead and start. If a student can't jump, they can easily modify by stepping instead of jumping. Time, the next one.
Okay, you get the idea. I am preaching to the choir. You understand the power of fitness and exercise. I'm just trying to share that it's also important in the classroom. It can be used as a brain break, lasts anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes, and there's a lot of benefit to doing that. So moving on in the framework, I want to talk about the next step, which is creating class cohesion, right? We are always, and I'm so glad that social emotional learning is now a part of the modern conversation in education. It's something that, teachers have figured out for decades and decades, but now it's a part of the mainstream. And we are trying to create a safe home for the mind, a place where the emotional environment stimulates intellectual achievement, where it is safe to make a mistake, where it is safe to be wrong, where, a kid understands that something is making a mistake is just free information about what not to do next time. That takes a special environment in the classroom. And there are so many ways to do it, of course, other than being physical, but there's some wonderful ways to do it. I'm going to show you a few of those ideas right now. Now, this is going to be a video of me, unfortunately, when I was much younger, with some kids down in Tennessee.
Bag, Don't Forget My Name, Titanic. Balloon taps. Split the class into 3 or 4 equal teams, 5 to 8 students in a group. Members of each team must stay hooked together by either joining hands or linking forearms. Each team is given a balloon that is close to the size of a volleyball. Each team has to stay linked together while tapping their balloon into the air. The participants can use any part of their body to keep the balloon up. However, they need to play safely and be aware of other teammates. If a balloon starts to drift away from a team, the entire team must stay linked together as they all move to get the balloon and keep it from hitting the ground. The first team to earn 3 or 5, teacher's decision, points will be the winning team. A team can earn a point by keeping its balloons in the air longer than the other teams. As soon as a balloon hits the ground, the other team earns a point. Teams can be combined to increase the challenge. The goal is for both linked teams to keep all the balloons up in the air. This is easier said than done. Encourage participants to develop strategies. Set goals and see how many balloons students can keep up in the air at one time. Over-under relay. Have your entire class form.
Let's see what the last one is. Elbow to elbow.
Elbow to elbow. Have students stand in a circle. Give one student a ball and ask them to pinch the ball between their elbows. The goal is to pass the ball completely around the circle in the fastest time possible without dropping it, elbows only. If the ball is dropped, the clock is restarted. The educator can increase the challenge of this game by adding more balls to the circle. In summary, during this.
So, those types of activities are great because there's no leader, there's no follower. We are in this together. They do not have to be set up as competitive activities. They can just be get together, take hands, let's keep the balloon in the air as long as possible. It's fun, there's laughter, there's engagement, there's community building. So there's just some great physical ways to build class cohesion and build community. Moving on to the next part of the framework is reviewing content. It's something that we've done other than physically for centuries, And now I'm suggesting that we use our bodies more often to create assessment, create content review. So let's look at one of the videos, and it's also not a great audio clip. So what I'm asking them is, what city is not in the state of Tennessee? They're Tennessee residents, and I was just asking them a review question. So you'll see how this works, and then we'll talk about some of the benefits you might not be aware of when we're done.
Cardio review. This activity can be used for reviewing multiple choice questions. Choose a cardiovascular exercise for answers A, B, C, and D. For example, A might be jumping jacks, B, box jumps, C, squat jumps, and D, mountain climbers. Present the class with a review question.
Which of the following cities is not in Tennessee? Is it A, Knoxville, B, Nashville, C, Memphis, or D, Houston? Go.
Allow them to answer by performing the cardiovascular exercise that represents their choice. It will be easy to see which students know the correct answer. Review the correct answer and move on to the next question.
So that is an example of cardio review. And there's a lot of things going on there. First of all, you don't need a brain break. You're doing something academic. Second of all, everyone is engaged in the review. Now, how often have we been a part of or have facilitated asking a question? The same 4 kids raise their hand, and you ask John to answer the question. The rest of the kids shut down the retrieval process, and it's like, glad she didn't call on me. It's also safe. How often those kids uncomfortable with raising their hand to answer a question. And if they get it wrong, they can look around and see what everybody else is doing. It becomes a review. They feel engaged. They feel a part. And also, it's not the end all be all of assessment. I get that. It's multiple choice. It's not very high up Bloom's taxonomy, but a teacher can see what they might need to go back over just from looking at the class's answer. And so it can be, instead of going through on a computer or going through 25 pages, it can be an effective assessment tool for the teacher. And one activity, if somebody asks me I have to describe it because I don't have video of it. If somebody asks me what's your favorite activity you've ever developed for any of your books or graduate courses, whatever, it will be something that we call the Footloose Review. And the only reason we call it the Footloose Review is because we used to play Footloose to it in the graduate course. But essentially, students are seated in a circle. They get a review card with a number on it. Then they're given a grid, an answer sheet with all the numbers on it. And they can't look at the card until you say go. And maybe we're going to do it 5 to 7 minutes. They turn the card over, answer the question in the appropriate box. If you have card 17, you answer it in box 17. And then when they're done, they stand up, they move to the center of the circle, and they make a trade. Now, they can't look at the new card until they've sat all the way down. Eventually, they're going to get duplicates and say, but they've sat all the way down. We want the little squat and to get up and move to the center and, got that one already, move back. So it's fantastically active. It's quiet because there's no talking, and it's just a really great physically active review activity. So something you might consider. And finally, the last part of the framework is using your body, right? Teaching content using kinesthetic activity. And we've all done it. There is no shortage of ideas out there, thousands upon thousands. If I was live with you, I would do something called what I call the kinesthetic carb activity, talking about insulin resistance. Not with you in a room today, maybe another time, but I want to show you a few examples on video. I forget, I think it's me doing it. Maybe it's Tracy, we'll see. So just the last part of the framework.
In demand. Editing on the move. Allow students to work alone or with a partner. Give each student or group a list of sentences that need to be edited. Have each person or group walk while editing one sentence at a time. To demonstrate the editing, students should do the following. Have students raise their hands in the air to demonstrate a capital letter. Have students pause for commas and slightly bend their knees. The period will be demonstrated by going into the tuck position. Bend down and hug your knees. The exclamation mark will be shown by jumping up and down on both feet at the same time. To demonstrate the question mark, the students will stand on one leg and make a hook-like action with the opposite arm. Apostrophes will be added by lifting the right arm and making a hook-like action. After all sentences are completed, the participants will compare their edited sentences while discussing any differences they have.
Stuffed animals are Jasons. Everyone be excited about that?
Finding the circumference and diameter of a circle. Create enough space for all students to form a circle. Have one student walk heel to toe around the entire circle, making sure to count his steps and finish at the same spot where he started. At the original starting point, have that same student turn toward the circle and walk a straight line from one side of the circle to the other, heel to toe, and counting all of his steps. That student has just marked both the circumference and diameter of a circle. The relationship is pi. The general equation is the circumference of a circle is a bit more than 3 times the diameter of the circle. Pi equals 3.141. Doing this kinesthetically could produce an inexact result, but will be close enough to teach the concept. Cardinal directions.
All right, I'm just going to stop there. You get the idea. And one of the things I tell teachers about this when they use this, and this is where we go back to the beginning of the hour, and we're talking about moving information from working memory into long-term memory. The brain prefers to do something like this versus more book work. But having said that, what I suggest to teachers that the next thing they should be doing after, learning something this way, because, which kid is going to be more likely to be able to teach this at home in the kitchen? The kid that walked around and did the circumference and diameter, or the kid that had to do the exercises in the book to learn it? It's definitely the kid that was a part of it and physically experienced it. But we live in a paper and pencil world, a testing world. And so the kids are learning these activities in the procedural memory lane run by the cerebellum, where how it's going to be expressed is through a semantic memory lane, a paper and pencil, eventually, right, run by the hippocampus. And so they need to have practice taking it from the physical activity to the paper. Some kids will do it right away. There's no problem. I can go right here and I get it now, I'll do it. But a lot of kids need practice in changing lanes. So it's just something to be aware of. As I said earlier, we are just scratching the surface about physically active learning. There were just some new research came out about the hippocampus, I think just over the past 6 months. And I have to go back and reread it, but just how when you do take a break, the brain doesn't stop working. The brain, the hippocampus specifically works on encoding the information they were just learning. And the brain break actually helps the brain to encode that information. The brain needs breaks. As far as learning goes, the shorter is usually better, short learning episodes. And then physically active learning can play an important part in that. When I work with teachers with, what's the word I'm looking for, Mike? Come on, block scheduling. This becomes critical. You have schedules of 80, 90, sometimes 120 minutes. This has to be a part of what you're doing to have the most effective teaching and learning process available. So it's just powerful. We know that the research says it motivates students and increases engagement. It just increases joy in the classroom and wanting to be a part of it. So that is the framework: preparing the brain, providing brain breaks, supporting exercise and fitness, creating class cohesion, reviewing content, and teaching content. And I just want to also add that I do try to post research. If you don't follow me on Twitter, that is what I use professionally. I don't post research anywhere else. And you can find me at Kinesthetic Class. One C in the middle. There's usually a C on the end and a C at the beginning of class, but there's only one C there, and you will find me. In fact, you can find that hippocampus research. I just posted it over the last week or 10 days or so. So folks, listen, it has been a tremendous experience for me to be here. Thank you for allowing me to keynote. Thank you for allowing me to express my passions. This is a wonderfully selfish act, doing something like this over the last 2 days. And I hope that you find some nuggets that are useful for you in your life. to create those habits and to keep being, physically active educators. And I hope you have a great rest of the day, rest of the conference, and the rest of the school year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was awesome. Appreciate your time.
Sure, my pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Mike, for an excellent session. It was so great to have you for the past 2 days. And we look forward to once again meeting up with you, hopefully at the National Summit in Newport, Rhode Island in 2023. At this time, we want to let everyone know you have lunch from now until 1 o'clock, at which time we will have both